My name is Harshil Parikh, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Tuva. And to start off, what is Tuva? So at Tuva, we're on a mission to empower organizations, that includes academia, businesses, civil society organizations, government, to build a strong foundation in data and statistical literacy across all the levels of the workforce. And I'll go into more detail about how we do that. And I think in the previous presentations, there's been a pretty good introduction of some of the challenges as well as the opportunities that exist today in this world in this market of data literacy. So let's start off with some bad news. So we'll start off with the bad news. What is the bad news? The bad news, and it's been repeated a couple of times now, is that defining data literacy has been very difficult. And the slide up here sort of shows you why. Data literacy can include statistical literacy. If you don't know statistics, you're not data literate. It can include things like knowing the differences between correlation and causation. It's still mind-boggling just how difficult it is for a lot of very, very well-educated individuals to mess it up. It includes things like sampling and surveying. It includes things such as data visualization and communicating and telling a story with your data. It also includes things like data quality and reliability. How do you design an experiment? How do you interpret dashboards and outputs from data? And that's not even going into all the nuances of data privacy, ethics, confidentiality, especially if you're working in highly regulated industries such as healthcare, such as education, finance. So even just from this map, and believe me, I can put 10 more things up here. So the situation that we find ourselves in is that in this very complex world that we live in, our society has become very complex. Data literacy is all of these things and many, many more. And it's become really hard to define it. So it's really hard to be able to deliver on a product or a service if you can't define it. So that's one of the first bad news that I want to deliver to you, is that it's hard to define data literacy. Some more bad news. Everybody needs it. Academia, businesses, government agencies, everybody is starting to feel the need for data literacy. But each one of these big sectors, and how we think of them as customers, has a different way of engaging in products and services, a different way of paying for products and services, has a different way of implementing products and services. So each one of these market sectors requires a different approach. So I wish it was a scenario that only one of these markets was where we were working in. It would be pretty simple. But the reality is that the way academia, colleges and schools think about data literacy and how they want to train their students is very different than how businesses want to train the workforce. And that is also very different than how government agencies want to train public administrators and employees and decision makers. So the second piece of bad news is that there's a lot of need for it, but each one of these buyers, customers, engages with products and solutions in very different ways. Some more bad news, and I think this one is the key, is that data literacy depends on who you are, what you do, what industry you work in, how you interact with data. And so a data literate teacher is very different than a data literate frontline manager. And that data literate frontline manager is very different than a data literate tax accountant or a marketer or a sales rep. So data literacy has to be defined based on what your role is, what industry you work in, how data impacts you and your goals, your priorities. So this is the third piece of bad news that we have in front of us. But there are some good news. What are the good news? The good news is that data literacy is beginning to be felt across the spectrum. There's a lot more work to be done to highlight the strengths, the weaknesses, the pain points that exist for organizations, for academia, for individuals, but the momentum is starting to build. Another piece of good news, sorry, we're done with the bad news. Another piece of good news is that investment in data literacy programs can be linked directly to outcomes, to impact, to results. Can be and should be. The third piece of good news is that because this is such sort of we're sort of the beachhead, there's so much opportunity for the next 10, 20, 30 years. As Manu and others have said, we're still sort of in the 18th century of data literacy, is that there's opportunity for very targeted niche offerings, and we'll go more into those in a little bit. And the last piece of good news is that data literacy programs are not likely to be zero-sum. What I mean by that is that just because you engage in a data literacy training program, it doesn't mean you're going to be done. There's going to be more and more coming for you over the years and in your career. So it's one of those things where it's not just once and done. So not being zero-sum allows for multiple engagements with customers, with individuals. And that is really good news. So how do we do it at Tuva? So at Tuva, we focus on these three customer segments: academia, businesses, and government. I'll primarily be spending time on academia and business. Those two are big enough. I'll share a little bit of the work that we've done on the government sector. Starting off with academia. So Tuva, we started off as an organization about 3.5 years ago, building a product for schools. You know, who else better to target than students and make them data literate? So Tuva today has been adopted by educators in over 8,500 schools around the world, over 220 or 250 higher ed institutions. So higher ed institutions include business schools, schools of education, in courses such as psychology, in sociology, in statistics, in business, in finance. So we have instructors and teachers all over the world starting to engage and use our tools to help more effectively teach these fundamental concepts around data, statistics, modeling, measurement, which have become a core part of the curriculum. There's a business model. We have a freemium business model, so we have a portion of our product that anybody can engage with for free, but then we also have a paid premium offering, which provides more content, more features, more data, more sophisticated tools, better support, professional development. And this is the part of our business that's been growing nicely, and we're very excited about it. We have customers in the US, in Canada, in Australia, here in Europe. So there's a lot more to be done here. And sort of just to give you a sense of how do our users think of Tuva, just a couple of tweets. These are somewhat older. Two of my favorites are, one of the teachers said, "Hey Tuva, I know we just met, but I love you." How often do you get to hear that, right? And this tweet here, right here, is from the former Secretary of Education for the United States, Arne Duncan, and he tweeted, "More teachers helping their students learn how to collect and analyze data." Now, isn't that the kind of the world that we want to live in and we want to build? So just some tidbits of how teachers and students are engaging with Tuva in their classrooms and in their educational experiences. The one that we're really focused on is providing and building data literacy programs for businesses. Now why? What are the drivers? Why are organizations, businesses big and small, reaching out to us and realizing, not just us, but other organizations as well, asking for data literacy training, asking for statistical training? And so there are a couple of drivers that are driving this. The first one is that almost any company that wants to stay competitive in the 21st century is starting to invest in new data technologies. They're buying new software, they're buying new databases. For those of you who come from the private sector, I'm assuming that that's what's happening in your company, because that's been a big focus and a lot of momentum has been built around investing in new data technologies, just because the scale has gotten so much bigger. The second thing the companies are doing is that they're acquiring and retaining data talent. So they're bringing on board data scientists, they're bringing on board data analysts, they're sometimes even hiring chief data officers. So they're doing all this new talent acquisition around data. And this has been going on for about 10 years now, 5 or 10 years. But what's been happening is that companies are also realizing that these two things are not enough. You can't hire 1,000 data scientists in an organization that has 100,000 people and expect to bring a culture of data and decision making using evidence. It just can't happen. The new blood and the new talent is essential, new technology is essential, but what you also need to do is you need to invest in your existing workforce. You need to build the capacities of your existing people. You're not going to replace your entire marketing team. You're not going to replace your entire product management team. But what you can do is upskill them, retrain them, invest in their capacity building. So that is a big realization that organizations, many companies are starting to come through, is that for all the millions of dollars that they're investing in new technologies and hiring new people, the culture for data-driven decision making is not going to seep in until they start investing in their existing workforce. So that's the first driver. So what are they doing? Until now, their focus has been on data producers. The IT department has been their big focus. But now the conversations are now moving beyond the four walls of the IT department to data consumers. People who are not living and breathing millions and rows of data, but they're making decisions based on the analysis that their team is doing. They're working in and around new data scientists. They're building teams of people who are managing P&Ls and revenues and things of that nature. So the conversation for training and capacity building has moved from data consumers, data producers, to data consumers. Companies are now looking to create the link between data and analytics. I'm sure all of us can name our favorite analytics tool or a favorite company that's building the next generation BI software, business intelligence software. But companies are now looking to make the link between new analytics and decision making. And for that, you need a data literate workforce. You need data literacy across your organization. So how are we taking this opportunity? How are we approaching this? One of the first things we're doing is we're targeting specific audiences. We're targeting audiences that are inherently not very technical, but they have great decision-making power. They're in positions where they're accountable for their own decisions and their team's decisions. So we're targeting folks like managers, team leads, heads of business units. We're targeting folks like early career professionals, college students who have just graduated, they're in the first or second year of their careers. We're targeting summer interns. So a lot of organizations now in this hunt for bringing on board talent are investing in their summer interns. You're interning here for 8 weeks, we'll provide you a training program around analytics and around statistical literacy. So we're starting to power some of these programs for some companies, and I'll be giving some examples in a little bit. So targeting specific audiences has been our approach so far when we work with the private sector. One of the biggest challenges for organizations and for individuals as human beings is that we don't know what we don't know. So most organizations, most teams don't have a sense of how data literate their team is. Or how statistically literate your team is. Most of them probably took statistics in college, 5, 7, 8 years ago. They may or may not remember some of the fundamental concepts. So how do you measure? How do we provide this insight that here is your level, here's your team's level of data literacy. Here are the strengths and weaknesses. Here's where you need to invest some time and some energy and some resources. Here's where your team is strong. So what we're doing is we're developing and administering diagnostic assessments for specific audiences around statistical reasoning, around data visualization, to be able to provide the evidence. We have to eat our own dog food. Here's the evidence that your team needs to spend some time building up their data and statistics capacity. So we're administering these assessments. If any of you are leading a team and would like to be able to take one of these assessments to get a measure, we can always talk afterwards, but this is a great, although sometimes controversial way to be able to get a sense of where you are today and where you would like to be tomorrow. And the third thing we're doing is we're offering a modular program. So we have curriculum, and the curriculum is sort of organized into modules to be able to tailor to an individual customer's need. Companies, big and small, are their own systems with their own culture, with their own budgets and timelines and politics. And so we have realized that we can't go in with just one straightforward offering and hope that people will buy it and will engage with it and implement it the way we're offering it. So we have to be flexible and in both in our approach as well as our pricing. And so we've built a fairly modular program to be able to tailor the offerings to the needs of the customer. So that's been our approach so far. One of the things that I'd like to point out is that companies, most good companies that invest in their people, that care about their talent, that want to sort of nurture the workforce, already have budgets for learning and development, for professional training, for workforce development. And so we are able to be a part of that budget. Good companies allocate somewhere from $3,000 to $5,000 per year. Sometimes it's less. But our goal is to be able to build an affordable, effective solution to help organizations build their capacity within the budgets they've already identified for that year. So what have we done in the past? What are we doing right now? We started this work about 15 months ago. And so here's some examples of things that we are doing or have done before. So we've built a data visualization training program for a Big Four tax audit and advisory company in the US. It was actually quite a surprise for us to hear from them saying, hey, we want to upscale, we want to build a capacity around data visualization of our people. Can you help us do that? And it's not just about creating graphs and charts, it's about design principles, it's about best practices, it's about communication. So the whole curriculum, the good thing was they came with a curriculum, but we were able to help them implement and sort of bring it live. We're in the process of developing a statistical literacy program for a very large FMCG company in the US. So statistical literacy for consumer goods company that has primarily still gotten a very traditional way of looking at training, looking at their workforce. So we're very excited about this project, this client. We rolled out a data literacy program for summer interns at a large financial services company, and similarly for a global vision care benefits company. So again, the data, the approach, the curriculum, one has to customize, one has to contextualize for the industry, for the job profile. We've talked about before, how a marketer thinks and interacts with data is very different than how a sales rep would do it, or how a customer service representative would do it. And so we have had to be nimble with our approach and flexible with our curriculum, but the programs are starting to be rolled out. I mentioned that we've done some work for governments as well. So one of the programs that is not highlighted here due to the sort of consideration of time is just earlier this year we rolled out a pretty significant program for the World Bank around data literacy, both for their constituent partners as well as internally. And there's a pretty big conversation, Manu talked about this a lot, about data for development, data for better policymaking, data for not just ministries, but for civil society organizations, for citizens, for journalists. And so we developed a program in Arabic and in English and delivered it earlier this year. So that's been sort of our getting our feet wet in government. So how do we build a data literate future today? In order to do that, there are a couple of drivers as we talked about, and this is sort of my final slide. The demand for data literacy is on the rise. Companies are starting to realize that their investments in new technology and new software and new people is not going to be enough. There's a lot more we as an ecosystem can do to accelerate that growth, to hasten it, but there's already a pretty good set of momentum. Another sort of way to think about it is if you've been familiar with the Learn for Code movement, suddenly in about 3 years, it's gone from small pockets of people believing in learning to code to major countries have policies, major companies are sponsoring pretty significant programs to help students, to help their employees get their hands dirty with coding. If there's a Learn to Code movement, there certainly can be and should be a Learn data movement or data literacy movement. As always, things are not going to be sustainable unless they have an impact on the top or the bottom line of an organization and it meets their goals. And we have been able to and continue to think of ways to create a link between the data literacy program and how it impacts the organization's goals, the individual's goals, how it improves their capacity, how it improves their ability to make decisions, how it improves the decisions that they make, what kind of impact does it have on their team or their business. For those of you who are thinking about continuing to start an organization or start a company in this space, there's opportunity for targeted niche products and services based on industry needs and verticals, job profiles. And last but not the least, data literacy is akin to reading and numeracy. And so it is a fundamental need for productivity in the 21st century. And this is just the first innings, and there's plenty of work to be done in the future. Thank you.